I want to start by asking Siddharth about the reactions in political circles, in bureaucratic circles, in embassy circles about the interview, where the Prime Minister has really laid out his vision in terms of what he's hoping to get done in September when the Leaders Summit happens in the capital.
Well, we had a great day to get those reactions because it was the Business Today India at 100 summit, and we had a bevy of people come in, including senior government figures. So obviously, the very fact that the Prime Minister has spoken and gone on record, the only interview on the G20, and that to our network and Business Today, is fantastic. Two key things stand out. One, the clarity of the vision with regard to the direction of where G20 is supposed to head. G20 was born out of a certain kind of circumstance. The world has now changed, and therefore there are obviously fundamental questions on what it is going to do. And clearly it's not a forum for settling feuds of sorts, the kind that we are seeing presently. The second point is in terms of the economic vision, and Rahul, while we can debate about it, I was just going through it, and to me the clear line which stands out again and again, that where the Prime Minister says anything made in India with the sweat of Indians is local. So he's actually redefined a new way of India approaching global trade. We will source components from overseas. We have a PLI, but anything that is touched, created, crafted, assembled, indigenized, packaged by Indian hands with the sweat and toil of Indian workers is made in India, made for the world. So that's the key economic headline that I really take out from it.
Shankar, you've had an opportunity to go through the Prime Minister's interview with Business Today. What stands out to you as the most significant takeaway and the central message that you think the Prime Minister is trying to send to India and the rest of the world?
Well, that's the opening part where the most interesting thing is the clarity on what matters and what doesn't matter. So the opening question on whether this is about economic growth, about India's position in the global GDP order, he's very clear. He says that financial performance, economic performance is what matters, summits don't. And that kind of clarity is very interesting to see from a leader at that stature. The other thing that, Rahul, is important to recognize here is that we must look at the arc of history. The G20 came together sort of after the global financial crisis, and many think tankers had actually written it off, calling it G nothing. And now under India's leadership, all the relevant issues are being discussed. There are three major issues that have been brought to attention. One is the role of multilateral agencies, their configuration, their contours. The second is climate change finance. You will remember that it's been 10 years since developed nations had promised $100 billion climate finance, and that is still sort of in the pipeline and it's not happening. And the third is the general role of multilateral, aspect of how countries manage climate change. And how are we going to deal with it? Because this is one of the biggest disruptive forces that will play out, and it's going to cost money. So the world is moving from what I define as insufficient demand to insufficient supply situation. And this holds quite a few challenges for developing economies and also for developed advanced economies.
Okay, Geeta Mohan. We've heard since then that Justin Trudeau is indeed coming. We know that Vladimir Putin will not be coming. The Mexican president hasn't been coming because of various reasons of his own. What's been the reaction that you've picked up from within the embassy circles to the G20 president laying out his vision in terms of what he hopes to get done? Because the one thing that stands out very interestingly as you read between the lines of what the Prime Minister is saying, he's trying to take the attention away from Russia and Ukraine, saying that yes, that's a pressing problem. Yes, there may be no immediate engagement, but in any case, this is an economic forum and there are so many critical issues of the global south, trying to include African Union in the G20, which we want to get done, which has nothing to do with the war that's going on.
Well, going back to what Shankar said, Rahul, the first answer itself is comprehensive. Prime Minister Modi laying out the lay of the land for G20 in India and what the presidency really held. Russia-Ukraine war has been a troubling point for India because a joint communique with the Russia-Ukraine war and the language is going to be difficult. But that's the whole idea. The focus
Are they still attempting it or have they given it up?
They are. The attempt is not to have the language in the manner in which it is, but if there are concerns that countries have, even to do with China, they could all come in the footnotes, which is what the US ambassador told us just 2 days ago, that there will be footnotes in the chairman's summary. So that could be maybe a negotiation.
But no joint communique.
There will be a joint communique, but if the things that are not a part of the joint communique, but the world leaders really want them in, and India wants a certain few things in, which China is objecting to, they could come in the chairman's summary or in the footnotes. So that may be the middle ground that India is looking at and looking for. But the larger perspective, look at the kind of answers he's given. He is talking about the global south. He's talking about inclusivity. He's talking about making India in a better manner, where he's not just saying that you need to come and manufacture in India, but also how people need to realize their dreams through this and work for the planet as well. So it's a comprehensive response to all the G20 questions, all things G20, where he's also focusing on not just Make in India and climate, but also focusing on how to get every other country from the global south in.
Ashok Malik, you've been in this government in different positions for a long time. What are you making of the message that the Prime Minister is looking to send just days ahead? Because this interview is being read widely, not just in Indian government and bureaucratic circles, but internationally, because here is the Prime Minister laying out through this business theory conversation his vision for what he is hoping to get done.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you for your question. I think the key phrase the Prime Minister used in his opening answer was a phrase he's used through this G20 year and even prior to that, human-centric development. He's variously called it human-centric globalization in other platforms, but he used human-centric development in the interview with Business Today. There's a context to this. G20 was born in 2008 after the global financial crisis, as others have pointed out. The global financial crisis was perhaps the biggest shock to the international economic system since the end of the Cold War. In the last 3 years, we've had 3 shocks. We've had the COVID shock, which has had implications of various varieties. We've had the Ukraine-Russia war, which has also led to shocks in many directions, many geographies. And then we've had the US-China disjunction, the geopolitical shock. Now, if you imagine that these 3 shocks have changed the very nature of discourse in an organization like G20, then Prime Minister Modi has got it spot on. He's recognized that far from being a financial management forum and a talking shop, which is what G20 started off as 15 years ago, G20 has to reinvent itself as central to the developmental challenges and debates of our times, which is the Modi legacy, really. So, the concerns of the global south, which he's brought right to the core of G20, because you can't ignore the fact that all 3 shocks I spoke about, whether it's the implications are in food and energy prices and shortages, whether in climate finance and climate transitions, whether in sustainable debt, or whether in the quest to have an equitable access to digital public infrastructure and related technology. All of these are concerns of the global south, and the global south and its developmental challenges and issues and aspirations have to be central to any G20 agenda.